Hey there, and welcome to my channel, the channel that I call Work in Progress, always evolving, always work in progress as well. We're a newer channel, but I think we're always going to be evolving, still kind of finding our yellow brick road path, so to speak, and maybe that's how it's always going to be. Who knows? But that's where we are right now. It is also a channel where I'm really have my mind set so far on having conversations with people just like you and me. What I mean by that is just everyday folks, people, that are just trying to navigate through life, not necessarily a teacher of certain spiritual practices or somebody that's, a healer of some type or an author. In other words, just those of us that are out, boots on the ground, moving through these challenging times. So if this idea appeals to you, just look below this video because that's where I have my contact information, and you just need to click on that and give me a holler, and let's see where we can go from there. Okay, so today I want to talk about what I'm calling is, and a lot of people call, unresolved traumas. Now, this is a big subject, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice in just one video, or this video could be very long, too long. So we're probably going to have part 1, part 2, maybe even part 3. Why I feel this is so important to talk about right now is because it's something that so many people are starting to experience as we are going through this process, this evolutionary process. Again, we have to really clear out all the old beliefs, all the old behaviors that no longer serve us, and this is clearly one of them. So first, let's talk about what is a trauma. If you say trauma to people, oftentimes they say, oh, I had a pretty okay life. I don't think I had any really traumas in my life. In other words, people think of a trauma as being something like huge, like, being maybe sexually molested or being abandoned and no parents to take care of you, or, being physically abused every day. It can go on like that, like all the major things that could happen that one might call trauma. But that's not it. Trauma is basically the experiences we have that later on, or not too long after they happen, it depends when they happen, impact our life, And so they're not necessarily those that would be of a huge impact, or like a girl getting raped, that type of thing. In fact, if we could look at the traumas, if you looked at let's just say a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being less and 10 being the most, the highest level of trauma, then you can kind of get an idea maybe what I'm talking about. So I'll give myself as an example. So for me, in the category of maybe number 1, 2, something like that, a trauma for me, which is still not completely resolved, so we'll call it unresolved, is I was about 5, and I'm at the airport with my dad, and we were evidently trying to get to a place where we're going to pick a relative up, who was flying in from who knows where. Anyway, I'm holding my dad's hand, and we're walking, and there's lots of people walking toward wherever we're going. And I don't know what happened, but at some point I let go of my dad's hand, and I end up grabbing the hand and found out it's not my father. And I panicked. I mean, just panicked. But this was a one-time deal, and then, it got resolved there pretty quick in terms of my father realized I didn't have his hand, or the man that I grabbed the hand realized. Anyway, I got back with my dad. It wasn't like one of those horrendous traumas, but it was a trauma that ended up having an impact on my life, even though it just happened one time. That's what I can speak to. And the impact on my life, and it still can go on, is if, let's say my husband and I are in an area, it could be an airport, but let's try something else here, where it's really crowded, lots and lots of people milling around. Maybe it's like a outdoor festival that we have a lot in California, and so it'd be easy to get kind of lost in the crowd, so to speak. And so I have a real need to really make sure that I'm within eye distance or hold hand distance from my husband, because I have this reaction to lots of crowds, and somehow getting lost in the crowd. Now, it doesn't make sense as an adult. I have a phone, he has a phone. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that I know how to take care of myself, right? However, this trauma comes up, and it's subtle, and it's unresolved, and I know what it is. And when I'm talking about unresolved traumas, just kind of let me back up here a minute. It means they're traumas that you remember. Something happened, but you're kind of unconscious of how it may be impacting you today in your adult life. And it could have started in your teenage years, who knows, depending on your trauma. So, if the trauma is moving from just being a 1 or 2, it happened once. And, a trauma could happen once, and it could be a severe, serious trauma, and so that would move it up to a ranking of 10. But again, I'm using myself as an example just to give a little bit of a range here. So 10 for me, trauma, would be my mother's emotional abuse toward me, which impacted my life in all ways, so many ways, because of the constant, could call it harassment, that I had from her. So it really affected my self-worth. It affected everything about me, that I was constantly being told how stupid I was, how ugly I was, basically how I just wasn't perfect, ever. I wasn't enough. And this went on every single day until I finally left the house at about 18, and then it continued even after that, if for the time that I did still have contact with my mother. So that would be, for me, a 10, and I identify many times, including like people pleasing, that kind of thing, ways that I've demonstrate how that trauma has impacted my life. It gets demonstrated for me or to me. And one of the ways that I react also to that, or have trauma, is I used to say to myself, or if some people have seen this other video, I used to talk as a child to a keyhole, thinking, well, maybe there was my angels in there, and I would say, I'm not who they say I am. And then as I grew up, I said, I'm going to prove, this was to myself, I'm going to prove to me that I'm not who my mother said I was. I'm going to prove it. And so I became a workaholic, an entrepreneur, definitely a workaholic, and did everything in my power to be in control, number one, of proving that I wasn't this unworthy, stupid, not worth even living a person, not worth being on the planet. I was out to prove to myself that that's not who I was. And that's a pretty typical thing that will happen to some of us that have had different type of traumas, is it'll get hidden, and that's why it's unresolved. It can get hidden in being a workaholic and being a overachiever. That was my other thing in the work world. So it's like something's driving you, and it could look great in the work world, like, oh yeah, you get all kinds of awards and rewards for being the top producer and for being the best in what you do, etc. But the point is, and what really is most important to identify, is where is this drive coming from? And this is key, because then what will happen down the road is life will take care of making sure you begin to resolve this trauma. We just saw a movie the other day about a guy that this is actually based on a true story, where he had been molested as a teen on a regular basis, as where he worked as just a part-time job at a gas station or something that had, sold food as well. And this guy had a very demanding father. It was the father that found him the job and said, you need to learn to work, and yada, yada. Anyway, this guy ends up being a top producer in the stock market, and very strong in his work ethic, and workaholic. And anyway, the end result is his life fell apart at some point, and he had to, well, he did. He was able to find a way to finally deal with this, but he just about destroyed himself. And that's where people go. You can just about destroy yourself if it's not looked at and handled. I saw another podcast about a guy whose best buddy actually works with traumas, and at some point he said to the best buddy said to this guy, you are showing evidence of severe unresolved trauma. And so this guy got some help, and it can look pretty awful out there. So don't want to get so far into that right now. We'll do that in part 2. The key is to understand that we all have traumas. If you are on this planet and you're an adult, you've gotten to an adult age, probably even started happening sooner than that, probably around teenage years, where you started to react to life based on some different traumas that you've had. And again, if we use the ranking of 1 to 10, it doesn't matter if it seems like a not such a big trauma, not such a big deal, but it's something that is working with you, working in a way that's not in your best interest. Just like me when I'm in crowds, being concerned I might I'll get lost in the crowd and I'll lose my husband, and God, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what I'm thinking then. So let me take a sip. So what you want to be able to do is not just blow off any kind of drama that you've had in your life. And the way to do this is you begin to go inward, and you begin to explore the things that you are aware of, in memory at least, of things that happened to you that, kind of stick with you. You remember them. This is different than when people repress trauma so they don't remember it, or something happens when they're 6 years old and they don't remember it until they're 30 years old, but it's having an impact on their life. There's somebody, in fact, that I know that this happened to. When she was 6 years old, her father molested her, and she was with the father for a short time before moving to where her mother was. The parents were getting divorced, and she repressed it. She didn't remember it until she was in her 30s. But she'd always had eating disorders, body issues, the anorexia type, and never really understood exactly why. And finally, in her 30s, early 30s, somehow this memory came back, and she's been able to put, 2 and 2 together and see where this began. Now, she still struggles to some degree with this trigger. And that's what it is. These issues become triggers, and we get triggered by the outer experiences, and we don't exactly know what it is that is going on, because it's not so straightforward. It can be a bit sideways or confusing. And none of us really like to look at our traumas in life or experience them or even admit to them, really. I mean, a lot of us, we don't want to admit to what's really going on. or why we need to have certain control or feel we need to have control over something. We're protecting ourselves, we think we are, from a trauma, but that's not what's happening. We're just keeping it it's not getting resolved. And how it does get resolved is through first of all, we have to become aware of what the trauma is. And that's a challenge in itself. And it doesn't feel good because it's a lot of traumas are emotions, and we need to release them. You're going to feel them in your body, and can be very, very uncomfortable. And as you know, in this society, we've learned to repress or not take care of our traumas. In other words, we never want to look weak, or we don't want to look like we're got a problem or a mental problem, or whatever the labels are that we put on things that aren't looking perfect in the world. We're not looking perfect in the world. So there's these rules, in a way, or the way society thinks is the way we need to behave or show up or believe. And all of that covers up what's really going on within us as a human, or having this human experience. So we tend to resist any kind of idea of a trauma. You can ask somebody, what did you have any traumas in your life, or what were your traumas? And they'll say, actually, no, I was really lucky. I had a really good family and a good life, so I didn't really have any traumas. But they have. They're just not seeing it as trauma. That's not to say that some of us can grow up in a really positive setting. So maybe our trauma levels or our traumas have been less, but they're there because it's part of the human experience. It happens. We just either don't consider it a big deal, even though and then we don't do the examination to find out, how is this actually impacting my life? So that's where even a first question can come up about what pattern or patterns in my life go on that maybe are not in my best interest, or just start to notice patterns in your life. That could be a belief system that you stick with, or it could be the way you get triggered or react to something in the outer world. A lot of different traumas, particularly those that are on the scale of more the 5 to 10 scale, can be related to anger. A lot of anger, where, for instance, in the movie that we saw, where the guy had been molested, where he was working, and his father kept insisting he had to go to work, and so he really had tremendous anger that he had not that was unresolved, and it was coming out in very challenging ways. Anger because he didn't feel he was in control, and he was basically felt as a victim in that situation. And so as he responded to this trauma that was held in his body, was through making sure that would never happen again. So his anger helped him to make sure that nobody was going to take advantage of him. And like I said, eventually his life fell apart to look at this. And that's what life does. That's what happens. It happened to me as well. And I'll go into that in another video. The main thing that I want to have as a message here today is to invite you to, first of all, look at the patterns in your life that show up all the time. So, as the examples would be, maybe you're a perfectionist, maybe you're a workaholic, as we like to call it, maybe you're an overachiever, and maybe you're not quite those areas, but something like I mentioned, where, when I'm in a crowded area, I have the issue with I'm going to get lost in the crowd. Or maybe it's just about getting lost. It shows up, but it's a pattern. It is a pattern. Now I have to say it's finally stopped. I realized the other day a reoccurring dream. I used to have this, I had it for years and years and years. And really, I don't exactly know when it stopped, but I probably haven't had that dream for, I don't know, maybe a year or longer. The truth is, I don't know when it stopped exactly, but it's not that long ago. And this reoccurring dream I would be lost on the street. There would oftentimes be an area where I grew up in Denver where I was looking at the buildings that I thought I knew in downtown Denver, but I couldn't find my way to my car. I couldn't find my way home. It was that kind of dream. So it was always a very scary dream. And, I never put it together with where that came from, but where that came from was the deal at the airport when I grabbed the wrong man's hand, not my dad's. And so sometimes you'll notice a reoccurring dream that you're having, and if you can trace that back to possibly something that happened in your childhood, then that might clear that up or show you how that trauma is showing up. So it's like we need to do an investigation of the patterns that we have in our life or the ways that we react in a patterned way, that every time this happens, this is how I react. As you begin to open up this idea, and all it takes, by the way, is first just intention. The intention to say, I want to find out, I want to see, I want to investigate where I might have some trauma in my life that I'm not aware of, or that that is not serving me. That's all. You're first just opening up to that idea. And, life is amazing because once we start opening up, then life will respond in so many different ways. I mean, you hear it all the time. Somebody's in a bookstore and the right book falls in their hand, or it could be YouTube videos. That's happened for me a lot. Whenever I'm supposed to be, would help me to see, it shows up, to help me resolve something or to help me investigate what's going on. So it is amazing. We just need to open up. It's not like we have to go through more trauma and drama to get identified with this pattern in our life. It's just the first step is saying, I want to know. I want to be able to see. And you ask your guides or just ask out there, help me. That's the other thing that's really important, is we learn to ask for help. We grow up in a society that kind of poo-poos asking for help, It's not considered being a strong, responsible person or whatever that is. It's like just looked down upon to ask for help. Maybe more for men than women, but women have it just as much. So the first thing is move beyond that and ask for help. You're asking for help on an inner level. And help will show up on an inner level. Again, it may show up through, a YouTube or a book, I don't know. But it's going to show up when you ask. You will get help in identifying this. So hopefully this opens up an idea for some of you, particularly if you're identifying with this idea of patterns in your life or responses to certain situations. Those aren't just happening by chance. It's not like that. They're happening based on something that is inside you, like a trauma, a belief system, etc. And once we can clear that, and we clear it just by acknowledging it and seeing it, seeing it in action, then we're relieved from that. And that gives us so much more, even just energy for everyday life. But it clears up the suffering and the difficulties that we may be having. So I've said this before in videos, but you're never upset for the reason you think that the outer world or a person in the outer world or anything, circumstance, whatever, is not the thing that's the problem. It's not what is upsetting you. It's none of that. It's you get triggered. And if you didn't have a certain something, let's call it a trauma because that's what we're talking about, inside of you, you wouldn't get triggered. There would be nothing to trigger. It'd be like, it's not connected. So you don't respond to every single thing out there. And maybe you have a friend that reacts a certain way to something and you think, I don't even know why you're reacting like that. It doesn't bother me. That's how it works. So hopefully, like I said, this made some sense. Well, that's the first thing, that it makes sense to some of you. And hopefully it'll help someone out there who's kind of on the edge of seeing this now. And, there's a lot more we'll say about this in some other videos. I'll do a part 2 video for sure. And let's see if we can't start to move in the direction of healing this part of ourselves, this part that needs to be healed, so that we can be part of this evolutionary process by releasing. This is what it's taken, guys. While we're going through this process, it really, I've said this before, and I'm not the only one. I hear it all the time out there, that we need to release whatever's no longer serving us. We can't bring our old beliefs, our old traumas and dramas, our old ways of being that are totally unhealthy, whether it's out there with the, climate control, looking like that, whatever it is, it all has to be released. We can't bring any of it with us, meaning we need to let go of what it is that's keeping us stuck in the 3D world that we're in right now. So hopefully that's motivation for some of us to really be willing to go within and work through our own trauma and drama so that we can move on. So I think that is about all I'm going to talk about right now. Until next time, think about how to maybe get this even more of a clearer communication, but hopefully some of it was clear. And that this will get some of you inspired to maybe look at what's going on inside. So if you did like this video, please click like. Also subscribe. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. And leave a comment. I love comments. Please leave a comment what's going on for you. Maybe you have some suggestions that could help others, because that could really be another way we can share. So definitely leave a comment. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you'd like to have a conversation with me about your life's journey, your stories that you're willing to share, then click on that link below and let's see how we can make that happen through having a conversation on that we can put onto this channel, and we'll do it through Zoom. Okay, guys. Thanks a bunch for showing up. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you who are bothered to listen to my video. I really do have an appreciation for you all out there. In the meantime, be kind to yourselves. That's the other thing that's so vital that we're working on right now, and that's a big one for me. Believe me, I am really, really working hard on the being kind to myself. So I hope you're working at that as well. And until next time, take care. Let's see if I can click this thing off in one click. It's really weird why I can't, right?